Welcome back to Grim Chronicles, my fellow explorers of history's darkest corners. Close your eyes for a moment and step into a world far removed from our own. A world of flickering candlelight and cold stone walls. It's 1347, and you're Margot, a young bride of barely 15 winters, standing in the doorway of a damp cottage somewhere in medieval Europe. The air is heavy with the scent of wet wool and wood smoke, and your heart pounds like a war drum as your new husband, Henrik, approaches. He's nearly twice your age, a man chosen not for love but for his 3 pigs and half an acre of barley, a transaction sealed by your father to secure the family's future. Your hands tremble, clutching the rough woolen shift your mother stitched for this night, the same one she wore, and her mother before her. Through the thin walls you hear Henrik's friends, drunk on ale, banging pots and shouting crude encouragements. They're waiting for proof that your marriage has been consummated. Their voices a reminder that this moment belongs not just to you and Henrik, but to the entire village. This isn't a love story. This is the raw, unfiltered reality of medieval intimacy. A world where the bedroom was less a sanctuary and more a battlefield, governed by rules so strange and restrictive they'd make your skin crawl. Every touch, every whisper, carried the weight of eternal salvation, family honor, and survival itself. Picture yourself in Margot's shoes, the rushes crackling beneath your bare feet as Henrik's calloused fingers reach for the leather cord at your throat. You're not just nervous. You're caught in a web of superstition, religious terror, and community scrutiny. The bedding ceremony, a ritual as public as it was invasive, has already unfolded. The wedding guests dragged you and Henrik to this chamber, undressing you while singing bawdy songs, their laughter echoing as they retreated to stand outside, ears pressed to the door, waiting for the sounds that would make this marriage legally binding. Those sounds, your cries, proof of a broken hymen, weren't just expected. They were demanded. Without them, or without the bloodied sheets displayed the next morning, you could be sent back to your family in disgrace, branded a liar or worse, face death for fraud. This was the medieval marriage bed, where privacy was a myth. The church, the community, even ancient pagan beliefs had a stake in what happened here. The church wasn't just a distant authority. It was an enforcer, dictating not just what you could do but how you could feel. Saint Jerome, writing centuries earlier, declared that a man who loved his wife too passionately was an adulterer, betraying God with his lust. By the 13th century, theologians like Thomas Aquinas had turned this into a rigid system, allowing sex only on certain days, never on Wednesdays, Fridays, Sundays, or during Lent or Advent, and only in one position, man on top, woman beneath, face to face. Anything else, oral sex, rear entry, or even too much enthusiasm, was a sin against nature, a one-way ticket to hell. Imagine the weight of that, knowing a single moment of pleasure could damn your soul. For Margot, every touch from Henrik was a tightrope walk between duty and damnation, her mother's whispered warnings about wifely duties ringing in her ears. The community was just as relentless. Your neighbors weren't just nosy, they were enforcers of the social order. A marriage wasn't just between 2 people. It was a contract that held the village together, ensuring land, labor, and lineage. If you didn't produce children, or if the marriage wasn't consummated, it could disrupt the fragile balance of survival in a world where life was brutal and short. That's why those bloodied sheets were paraded like a victory flag, proof that the deal was sealed. And if there was no blood, some brides, desperate to avoid shame, would prick their fingers or smuggle chicken blood to fake it. Virginity wasn't just a personal virtue. It was currency, more valuable than gold. For Margot's father, her purity was the family's wealth, and losing it outside marriage could ruin not just her but everyone tied to her name. The science of the time, or what passed for it, only made things stranger. Medieval medicine, built on ancient Greek and Roman texts, saw women as defective men. Their sexual organs were just inverted versions of male genitalia, the vagina and inside-out penis, the ovaries, internal testicles. This wasn't some fringe theory. It was taught in universities across Europe. Physicians like Constantine the African claimed women needed prolonged stimulation to conceive, a belief that led to horrific conclusions. If a woman became pregnant after rape, courts often took it as proof she enjoyed it, because their science said conception required pleasure. This wasn't ignorance, it was a system that blamed women for their suffering, turning victims into culprits. And then there was the wandering womb, a theory that said the uterus could float around a woman's body, causing madness or even death. The cures? Burning sweet herbs near the vagina to lure it back or smearing foul substances under the nose to drive it down. For Margot, these weren't just ideas. They were the reality of her body, treated as something mysterious and dangerous that needed constant control. Menstruation was even worse. The church called it God's curse for Eve's sin, a monthly mark of shame. Texts echoing Roman writers like Pliny the Elder claimed menstrual blood could kill crops, sour wine, or drive dogs mad. Women on their periods were banned from churches, forbidden from cooking, and sometimes sent to isolation huts outside the village until they were clean. But women didn't just accept this, they fought back, quietly. They passed down secret knowledge, using moss or cloth rags for protection, tracking cycles by the moon, brewing teas from chamomile or yarrow to ease cramps. This was power, but it was dangerous. A woman caught with herbs like pennyroyal or tansy could be accused of witchcraft, the line between healer and heretic razor-thin. Yet these practices persisted because survival demanded it. In a world where 1 in 3 women died in childbirth, any control over your body was a lifeline. Beneath the church's grip, older traditions lingered. Village-wise women, later branded as witches, held on to pagan knowledge of herbs and rituals. Pennyroyal and tansy could prevent pregnancy, though the dose was often deadly. Mandrake root, shaped like a human, was worn as a fertility amulet, so valuable that fakes carved from briar flooded markets. Women might pray to Saint Margaret for safe childbirth while burying afterbirth under their doorstep for future fertility, blending Christian and pagan in a way that drove priests mad. The church called it heresy, but even devout Christians couldn't let go entirely. The line between medicine and magic was so blurred it might as well not have existed. As Margot stands in that cottage, the candlelight flickering across Henrik's weathered face, she carries not just her own fear but the weight of these contradictions, church rules, village eyes, and the whispered secrets of women who came before her, all crowding into that smoky room. The fear didn't stop at the church's rules. It seeped into the very air of the village. Demons were a real threat in medieval minds, not just stories to scare children. Succubi and incubi, female and male demons, were believed to seduce humans in their sleep, stealing life through sex. A succubus could take a man's semen, transform into an incubus, and impregnate a woman, producing cursed children. These weren't myths. They were theological and medical fact. Women who woke paralyzed, feeling a weight on their chest, now known as sleep paralysis, were thought to be under demonic attack. Admitting it could mean exorcism or, worse, burning as a witch. The church prescribed rituals to banish these demons, but suspicion often turned to accusation. A woman reporting strange dreams could find herself on trial, her body and soul under scrutiny. For Margot, even sleep wasn't safe. Her dreams a potential betrayal in a world that saw danger in every shadow. But there was resistance hidden in those shadows. Pagan fertility rituals survived, disguised as Christian festivals. May Day was more than a celebration. It was a night when young people slipped into the woods, free from the village's watchful eyes. The surge of February births tells you what happened under those trees. These moments were rebellion, a reclaiming of desire in a world that tried to crush it. Brides might be showered with grain for luck, their beds blessed with holy water, but also laced with secret herbs to boost fertility. It was a delicate balance, honoring the church while clinging to older, earthier beliefs. The legal system was no kinder, defining rape not as a crime against the woman but against the man who owned her, her father, husband, or lord. A nobleman raping a peasant might pay a fine, while a peasant raping a noblewoman faced torture and death. Adultery was worse, but only for women. A wife caught with another man could be legally killed by her husband. No questions asked. Men meanwhile, could sleep with unmarried women or servants with little consequence. The double standard was brutal, rooted in a world where women's bodies were property, their honor everyone's business but their own. Yet, in this grim reality, there were glimmers of defiance. The courtly love tradition, sung by troubadours, turned desire into a spiritual quest, a secret world where love was sacred, not sinful. These were mostly noble fantasies, but they showed that even in this controlled world, people dreamed of passion. Bawdy tales, like the French fabliaux, laughed at the church's rules, describing forbidden pleasures with a wink and a grin. Minstrels spread these stories in taverns, giving voice to desires the church tried to silence. For every priest preaching abstinence, there was a storyteller whispering rebellion, and for every woman like Margot, trembling under the weight of duty, there was someone offering a spark of hope. This tension between control and desire, fear and freedom, is what makes this world so gripping. It's not just history, it's humanity, stripped raw, fighting for connection in a world that wanted to snuff it out. The church's grip tightened with every passing century, turning the bedroom into a surveillance state. Confession wasn't just spiritual cleansing, it was an interrogation. Priests would press you for details. What position? How often? Did you enjoy it too much? Your answers could land you in a church court, where neighbors might testify about the sounds they heard through your walls. The Inquisition, starting in the 13th century, took this to a new extreme, torturing suspected heretics to confess not just their beliefs but their bedroom habits. The manuals used by inquisitors were obsessed with sex, positions, frequency, sensations, as if sin could be measured in every sigh. Punishments were public and brutal. A woman convicted of adultery might be locked in a cage too small to stand, fed only bread and water until she starved. A man convicted of rape could be castrated in public before hanging. These weren't just penalties, they were spectacles, designed to terrify everyone into submission. The church even had theories about sexual compatibility, blending astrology and humorism. A hot husband and a cold wife might be doomed to infertility, or so physicians claimed. Wealthy families had doctors examine a bride's hips, wide for fertility, narrow for barrenness, or even the groom's anatomy for fit. It was clinical, like inspecting livestock, but it was deadly serious. A marriage without children could be annulled, leaving the woman shamed and the family's alliances in tatters. Consanguinity rules, banning marriage between close relatives, were so complex that unions could be dissolved years later over a distant cousin. This wasn't just about biology, it was about control, keeping families in check through the threat of annulment. For men, sexual prowess was tied to honor. Impotence wasn't just personal, it was a public failure that could ruin a man's standing. Medieval French had a whole vocabulary of shame for it, words that cut like knives. For women, the stakes were higher. A single rumor could destroy a woman's marriage prospects, branding her impure in a village where everyone knew your business. But resistance thrived in the cracks. Prostitution existed in a gray space, condemned by the church but regulated by cities. Brothels in places like London and Paris had strict rules, special clothes, designated districts, regular health checks. These women were outcasts yet essential, a safety valve for a society that demonized desire but couldn't erase it. The rumored rite of first night, where lords could claim a bride's wedding night, may or may not have been real, but its existence as a story shows how vulnerable women were. A lord could take what he wanted, and no one could stop him. Power, not morality, ruled. Yet people pushed back. Courtly love, with its tales of knights pining for unattainable ladies, was a rebellion against the church's cold pragmatism. Mayday's forest romps were another, a night when young people could escape and explore desires the church forbade. These moments weren't just about sex, they were about claiming a piece of freedom in a world that offered none. Contraception and fertility were another battleground. Women used dangerous herbs like pennyroyal or drank wine mixed with ground-up bees to prevent pregnancy, methods that could kill as easily as they worked. Mandrake amulets and rituals like jumping backward 7 times after sex were desperate attempts to control reproduction in a world where childbirth was a death sentence. The church called it witchcraft, but for women it was survival. They'd pray to saints while hiding amber charms to prevent miscarriage, blending Christian and pagan in a quiet defiance. These acts were small but vital, a way to claim agency in a world that saw women's bodies as property. Every herb, every charm, was a rebellion against a system that offered no mercy. The bedroom itself was far from private. Medieval homes were crowded, children, servants, family all sharing the same space. Sex happened with an audience of snores and whispers, the smells and sounds of intimacy blending into daily life. Privacy was for the rich, who had chambers and time to indulge in pleasures peasants could only dream of. Noble marriage manuals, hidden from the masses, offered tips on everything from wedding night techniques to sex during pregnancy, revealing a secret sophistication. But for most, like Margot and Henrik, the bedroom was a pressure cooker. Penitential manuals listed hundreds of sexual sins, each with its own punishment, showing a fascination with sex that rivaled the church's hatred of it. Church courts interrogated couples about their wedding night, inspected bodies for signs of penetration, and questioned neighbors about what they heard. A marriage wasn't legal until consummated, so proving it was a public ordeal with annulment looming if it failed. The church's obsession extended to conception itself. They believed both men and women produced seed, and female orgasm was necessary for pregnancy, a belief that, once again, hurt women most. If a woman conceived after rape, it was proof she enjoyed it, protecting rapists and shaming victims. The moon and stars were thought to determine a child's sex or fate, so kings and nobles consulted astrologers before sex, believing cosmic alignment shaped their heirs. Even armies abstained before battle, thinking sex sapped their strength. Sexuality wasn't personal, it could sway wars or kingdoms. Yet, despite it all, people rebelled. The fablios, those bawdy tavern tales, laughed at the church's rules, describing forbidden pleasures with glee. Minstrels spread these stories, giving voice to desires the church tried to silence. Fertility rituals thrived under Christian guises, with bridesbeds laced with herbs and May-Day trysts leading to February babies. These were acts of defiance, proof that desire couldn't be crushed. We've walked a long path through this dark, tangled world, and now we stand with Margot one last time. In that smoky cottage, the candlelight flickering as Henrik reaches for her. She's not just a girl. She's a symbol of a world where every intimate moment was a battle. The church, the village, centuries of superstition, all pressed down on her trembling shoulders. But in her fear, her quiet defiance, her mother's whispered secrets, we see something more. The unbreakable human spirit. Medieval sexuality wasn't just about bizarre rules or brutal punishments. It was about people navigating a system designed to crush their desires, yet still finding ways to love, to feel, to survive. This world was built on survival, producing children, securing land, maintaining honor. Love and pleasure were luxuries, if they mattered at all. Marriages like Margot's were transactions, sealed with public proof of consummation. The bloodied sheets, the bedding ceremony, the community's eyes, these were the glue of a fragile society, but they came at a cost. Women bore the brunt, their bodies property, their virginity more valuable than gold. A single misstep could mean exile or death. Yet women resisted, through secret herbs, hidden rituals, or simply enduring. The church turned the bedroom into a spiritual battlefield, where too much pleasure or the wrong position could damn you. But people didn't always obey. Nobles had secret manuals on pleasure, and villagers told bawdy tales, laughing at the rules. Mayday's forest romps and fertility charms were quiet rebellions, proof that no matter how tight the leash, human nature would slip free. Medieval science made it stranger, seeing women as flawed men, their bodies feared and controlled. Menstrual blood was poison, the womb a wandering menace, and pregnancy proof of pleasure. A twisted logic that blamed victims. Yet women built their own knowledge, passing down remedies and lunar tracking, defying accusations of witchcraft. Men weren't free either. Impotence was public shame, tied to their honor as warriors. Sexuality was political, shaping alliances, wars, even the stars' alignment. But the human spirit shone through. Courtly love turned desire into something sacred. Fablios laughed at the church, and Mayday trysts defied the priests. Even brothels, existing in that gray space, showed that desire couldn't be erased. Margot's story isn't just fear, it's resilience. Maybe she hid a charm, whispered a secret, or found tenderness with Henrik despite it all. This is why the medieval world matters. Their bizarre practices, bloodied sheets, wandering wombs, demon fears, seem alien, but they grew from the same drives we feel: connection, control, hope. Their world was harsher, the stakes higher, but their fight was ours. Every secret tryst, every hidden herb, was a claim to humanity in a world that tried to strip it away. As the candle flickers out in Margot's cottage, we see the truth. Sexuality is never just about bodies. It's about power, rebellion, and the stubborn, beautiful refusal to be controlled. Thank you for joining me on this wild journey through the shadows of medieval intimacy. If the story stirred you, hit that like button, subscribe, and drop a comment to let me know where you're watching from. Let's keep exploring history's grim truths together, because these stories, these raw, human struggles are what connect us across time. Until next time, keep seeking the strange, the dark, and the true.